My name is Lisa Franks, and I live full-time in my wheelchair-accessible campervan. I travel all around North America. I chase sun, surf, mountain bike trails, and any other adventure that comes my way. I like to keep things on my channel positive, but I also believe in keeping it real. And so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the added expense when you do van life using a wheelchair. If you are new to the channel, I want to give you a very warm welcome. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you for sticking with me. One of my goals with this YouTube channel is to showcase some of the amazing things that I can do in this life, even though I'm navigating it on wheels. I hope to inspire other people to go out and be adventurous and push the limits of what they think is possible within their life. But I also want to be really transparent about the extra challenges that I face just because I'm navigating my life using a wheelchair. The truth is, having a disability creates a lot of extra challenges in my life. It's not just navigating this inaccessible world, it can also create a big financial barrier. Not only do I have to buy wheelchairs every 3 or 4 years, my sports equipment is usually 10 times the price of what an able-bodied person would pay for their equipment. I have hidden medical costs. And yes, even van life is more expensive. Friends and I refer to this as a disability tax. It's just something that we've grown accustomed to, that everything in life seems to cost a little bit more just because of these wheels that I'm on. In today's video, I'm going to share some of the accessible features I had to add to the van so I could live independently in it. And then I'm going to break down the cost for you as well. And I have a feeling you might be surprised at the total cost to make this van accessible. So as I'm going through the video, I'd love if you could just keep a mental tally of what you think this item costs and what that item costs. And I'm really curious to learn what you think everything cost altogether. The very first thing that I had to do when I got my van is make it so I could actually drive. Because I'm paralyzed, I can't use my legs to operate the accelerator or the brakes. So I had to get something called hand controls installed. Now these are located under the steering wheel in mine. And it's just a lever system. So I push in for brake and I pull towards me for gas. Those go right down to the gas and the brake pedals. It's actually quite a simple design. Because I have one hand on the gas and the brake at all times, that means I only have one hand left to steer. So I've added this knob on my steering wheel, and that allows me to rotate the steering wheel with just one hand. It comes in really handy for those sharp turns or if I ever have to do a U-turn. I added swivel seats to both the driver and passenger front seats, and I did this right from the factory. This just makes it easier to transfer from my wheelchair to the driver's seat. It allows me to get my wheelchair in closer between the two seats in the cab. To get myself into the van, I have a special wheelchair lift called a super arm. To use a wheelchair lift, I simply clip my wheelchair to the chains hanging from the super arm, and it slowly lifts myself and the wheelchair right into the van. I like this style of lift because it is so simple. It will actually set me down on any terrain. It doesn't have to be level like a typical wheelchair lift. And I don't need a lot of space for parking. All I need is the length of my wheelchair, so it makes parking in the city much simpler. The lift is very compact. It only requires a 6-inch column in my doorway, where a typical platform lift would block the entire entrance. Right next to my wheelchair lift, I actually installed a shelf system, and it's open on both sides, so I'm able to access the items on the shelf if I'm outside the van or inside the van. So I've got my tools, books, jackets, sweaters, hats, and things like that. And so that saves me from having to go on the lift and get back inside the van if I quickly need to grab something. And so that saves me a ton of time. So I'm going to consider that an accessible feature for today's video. One feature I'm really happy I went with is a power sliding door. I ordered this right from the factory when I ordered my van, and it allows me to open and close the door just with a button on my key fob. When I'm inside the van, I can't actually reach the latch to be able to close the door, so this makes it completely possible to open and close the van from the inside or the outside. I've even had friends knock on the door when I'm up in bed, and I can just go click click and open the door and see what they want. So it's a really convenient feature for me when I'm not quite as mobile. I also added this little piece of flooring. Now normally that is where the step would be, but I needed a little bit of extra room in this space to be able to turn my wheelchair around fully. I added this hinge to the piece of flooring so that way it can be flipped up if the step is needed by somebody to get into the van, but for now I mostly just store my shoes under there. When I designed my kitchen in my condo, it was the first time I ever had a wheelchair accessible kitchen, and I took some of the elements from that and applied it to my van. One of the features I loved in my accessible condo was the ability to wheel under my cooktop and my sink. So when designing the van, I went and I did the same idea. So in this drawer, I actually have an induction cooktop that I pull out, and I can wheel my wheelchair under it so I can get really nice and close to the working surface. This is just a safety feature, really. Could you imagine if I had my cooktop here and I was reaching, trying to stir things and had flames going? So that was just another little design feature that I added to make my life a little simpler. The same thing goes for my sink. I'm actually able to, I kept the sink compartment empty underneath, so I'm actually able to fit my wheelchair in here and I can get closer to the sink. I do carry my mountain bike with me all the time, and I did not want to have it on the outside of the van exposed to all of the elements or risk of theft. So I actually chose to put it in the van, and it's underneath my bed here in the garage. Now because the bike is really high, that actually makes the bed high, and you can see it comes up over my shoulder. Because I'm unable to stand or bear weight, I have to use just my arms to lift myself anywhere, whether I'm going into bed or into my driver's seat. Since the bed is so high to accommodate the bike, I'm unable to get myself up onto bed alone. So I came up with a different method, and I put this bench next to my bed. It was strategically placed there because this is actually my elevator into bed. I bought a standing desk frame actuator and I placed it inside the bench. Now all I have to do is transfer onto this bench and push a button, and the lid of the bench actually rises up and gets me closer to the bed height. Now the piece that makes this elevator is an actuator. It's actually meant for a standing desk, or if you've ever seen like a TV pop up out of a cabinet, that's what it's meant for. It's really important when you live in a van to have some sort of fan to help control the moisture when you are cooking, or even the temperature on a hot day. I can't reach the controls on a manual fan or vent. So I had to upgrade to the Max Air fan that has a remote. So I have 2 remote powered fans, one in the front and one in the back, versus 1 manual fan and 1 manual vent that you would use your hands to operate. I did choose a high roof van. I thought if I ever had a travel companion that it would be nice for them to be able to stand upright while inside. Because I have all the height of a high roof van, I wanted to be able to use that storage. So I did make my cabinets the full height of the van. But once again, I can't reach very high. So for one of my cabinets, I actually added a pull down shelf. I can use storage up there, I can keep everything stored up there, but when I need to reach it, I can pull it out of the cabinet. And now it's well within reach. A lot of people that do van life carry equipment with them like a bike, but they're able to just lift the bike up and put it in their vehicle. My bike weighs close to 100 pounds and it's really long, and I'm just not able to lift it into my vehicle. I had to come up with a different method to get my bike in, and that involves a winch that's mounted under my bed and these ramps that I lay out. I have a video uploaded that shows all of the details on how I do get my bike into my van, so if you're interested in that, scroll back and you'll be able to watch it. Okay, now that I've broken down all the accessible features in my van, I'm really curious to learn what you think everything cost altogether. So do me a favor, pause the video right now and go to the comments and give me your best guess at what all of the accessible features in my van tallied up to in a dollar figure. And while you're at it, you might as well subscribe to my channel for more content like this. All right, did you do it? If you didn't, that's okay, I still love you. But if you did, big thumbs up to you. All right, so here we go. Here is a breakdown of the cost of all the features I went through in the van. Starting with the hand controls, they were $1,500. The swivel seats were $1,700. The lift into the vehicle, the biggest expense of all, was $14,700. My outdoor shelf that I could reach from the inside or the outside was $300. My power sliding door was $1,150. The extra flooring so I could turn around inside the vehicle was $50. The pull-out stove, I'm going to count as $0 because really that was just part of the design of the cabinets, and like any other accessible feature, it helps if you do it right from the start. It really makes the cost negligible. The lift up to the bed, so the actuator that's for a standing desk frame, was $520. To upgrade the max fans to remotes was $300. The pull down shelf inside my cabinetry was $100. That was actually a steal of a deal. I found it used when normally they're about $500 new. And the winch to load my bike into the back of my van was $115, and the ramps to load the bike were $70. So that brings me to a whopping grand total of $20,505 Canadian dollars, or 15,390 American dollars. I'm really curious if people were in the ballpark of what they thought the cost of the accessible features in my van were. It was a significant amount, and about 25% of the total cost of my van was just making it wheelchair accessible. When I was first looking at vans, I was looking at older vans, like a 2008 Chevy Express is one that I almost bought. And then I started to realize that the cost of the lift and the hand controls and all the things I needed would actually be more than the van itself. And did I really want to be putting the lift and the whole build, all that money, into a van that might only last maybe 4 or 5 years? I was incredibly fortunate to receive funding for my wheelchair lift from the Kinsman Telemiracle Foundation in Saskatchewan. Without that funding, I would not have been able to build the van of my dreams. When I knew I received the funding for the wheelchair lift, that actually meant that I could take the money I was saving up for the wheelchair lift, and I could put that to the cost of my van and my build. And so I was able to go from like a 2008 Chevy Express that I was going to buy to the 21 Ford Transit, because I didn't have that major setback of paying for the wheelchair lift. I completely recognize that I have a ton of privilege because I'm able to choose this lifestyle, and because I was able to hold out for some of those items that maybe weren't 100% necessary to live in a van, but definitely enhanced my experience in the van. And so I know a lot of people are forced into van life, and I completely recognize that I have a lot of privilege to choose this lifestyle. I don't want this video or the breakdown of the cost to be a deterrent for anybody if they do need some accommodations in their vehicle. There are certainly ways to do it cheaper, like finding a used wheelchair lift. There are a lot of platform wheelchair lifts that are on sale for almost dirt cheap. People are almost giving them away because they're actually taking them out to build vans and buses and things like that. So you might even be able to find a vehicle with one already installed. I wanted to share this information with you, not to make people feel bad for me or anything like that. I just wanted to make it known that, yeah, it is an extra challenge. I think a lot of the times people just see the wheelchair and they just think, oh, it's harder to get around. But there are so many other factors that affect my life because of the wheels. All right, that's all I have for you today. I hope you found this really informative and can really appreciate everything that went in to make this van accessible and for me to be able to live this lifestyle. Please remember to subscribe. It'll really help build my channel so I can make more videos for you. I've got more adventures up my sleeve, and we will hopefully see you in the next video. Until then, everyone keep it wheel.